Our next speaker is Lieutenant General Todd Isaacson from the Joint Staff J6. General Isaacson has a distinguished career spanning over 3 decades, bringing us a wealth of experience in C4 operations, strategy, and leadership. His career highlights include commanding at various levels, serving in critical staff positions within the Army and the Joint Staff, and leading the U.S. Army Cyber Command as the Chief of Staff. Please provide a warm welcome to General Isaacson.
Thank you very much, and it's a real honor to be here. Ma'am, thank you for the invitation, as always, and thanks for all of you who are attending here today. I know that yesterday you had a terrific conversation. I had chance contact with Paul Stanton in the Pentagon yesterday because he had driven down from DISA and Fort Meade, and we met in the hallway, and he had talked about essentially having the opportunity to speak today. And he had also emphasized the importance of the conversation and conveyed what he had said. So I had to completely revamp what I was going to discuss. But I think I'm complimentary. Also, Katie Arrington, I saw in a meeting yesterday. She said, "Hey, I went to this thing. I know you're speaking." So you're making a lot of headline news, at least in the building right now, with the important discussions that are occurring this week. What I'd like to be able to do today is hopefully lend in complement to those conversations, perhaps a warfighting understanding and perspective that I think highlights a handful of things, and I'll highlight them as I mention them, but there are really 3 or 4 big points that I think I would make, and I'll highlight them as I get there. I know all of you are probably hoping I'll be quick so you can get to lunch, and it's on a Friday, and you want to get to position to watch March Madness. I don't know about any of you, but I did not survive first contact yesterday, so my bracket is not looking really good, and I hope that all of you are faring a little bit better. So as I think about the operational environment as it relates to cyberspace, I would characterize it in a couple ways. One, it's certainly ever-changing, and the other piece is the volatility and the rapid pace that it's changing. And what's driving that, I think, is the adversary's ability to evolve. I think there are some components as to why the adversary is incredibly, any adversary, not a particular adversary, any adversary is active in this space is because of a couple of things that I think characterize cyberspace in a larger sense. And it wouldn't surprise this team, but I think it's important to recognize why this competition occurs with so many adversaries. One is the low barrier to entry. You are going to find very few nation states who are interested in going fighter to fighter and tank against tank formation and surface action group against surface action group. Cyberspace serves as a real opportunity to impose costs on adversaries at a relative low barrier to entry. The other thing, we operate at, in competition for the most part and below the armed conflict level, which I think is attractive to both nation states and their actors because, as I before mentioned, we're not looking to go toe-to-toe with the United States in many cases, but with the goal of imposing costs in a larger sense, this is an opportunity that it affords. Non-kinetic, I think, is an attractive component, and we can talk about the characterization, if you will, and the calculus that goes into decisions that the U.S. might self-impose as it relates to any particular adversary on any given effect that an adversary might take. An example might be the U.S. might say, hey, we have the ability to do something in cyberspace, but we will also say we're not quite sure that juice is worth the squeeze, and we're not sure that's an appropriate use of those non-kinetic fires. Not all adversaries have that same risk calculation. And so this is an area where, as cost imposition is considered by our adversaries, I think distinguishes the difference in the balance there. Another thing that is, I think, characterized of the operational environment is the attractiveness of non-attribution. As all of you as professionals know, We often specifically tell that we have executed, and sometimes we seek to hide the fact that we are responsible for effects that are occurring. Adversaries find this an attractive opportunity because you can hide behind both the extension of the actor through a sponsor of a nation state, or actually attribution becomes difficult to discover. The final piece I'll mention as it relates to the attraction of our adversaries in this space is the global reach. You don't have to be any particular close proximity to your target to be able to have the effects that you hope to have. You have obviously a well understanding of this idea, but I think it's all of those factors and many others that we could discuss, talk about why this space is expanding and the operational space that our adversaries continue to operate are attracted to cyberspace for those reasons. One of the things, if I'm a member of the cyber workforce, so I think about those attributes, and one of the things that I would want to be thinking about is key terrain. Key terrain in cyberspace, all of you would recognize, can be physical, it can be virtual, it can be logical, it can be a lot of different things. The point is understanding your key terrain and understanding the adversary's key terrain, I think, is part and parcel to the operational imperative that a workforce brings to this environment. I think another piece is the connection between national terrain and Department of Defense terrain. And the distinction I make is critical infrastructure and key resources and the partnership that's necessary for the Department of Defense specifically to partner with industry and with DHS and other key members in the ecosystem of cyberspace to ensure that the activities that we are coordinating across intergovernmental are coordinated to the degree that achieve the greatest effect. What we run out of, I think, quickly is capacity to do everything. And what we have to do is obviously decide where the priorities are, and that priority is informed by an understanding of the key terrain and critical infrastructure and resources. One of the things I think we can do better, and this is where I think I foot stomp one of the first things that I think the workforce helps us is we have to do better at basic blocking and tackling and the defense of that key terrain. When we think about the kinds of adversaries and the successes they potentially have had as of late, in most cases, we're not seeing exquisite or extraordinary capabilities. We're seeing taking advantage of the opportunities that we afford them. So our basic hygiene, if you will, has to improve. This is a conversation that resonates, I think, in the Pentagon. It resonates with the combat commands. It certainly resonates with the defenders, and hopefully it resonates with you because we, the collective we, not you specifically, have to do better. And it's akin to, having, I'm a big fan of cool cars. I don't own one. I've always wanted to have a really cool car, but I don't have one. But if I had a cool car, and we'll just use a Porsche or a Ferrari, an example might be I have one, it's in my garage, and the garage door is closed. And so in my mind, I have secured my vehicle. But I don't know that I've left the key in the ignition and the side window is available and open. So akin to that rubric or that vignette is we are not doing everything we can to protect that vehicle, and we're not always doing everything we can to protect key terrain in cyberspace. And we have to do better at the basic blocking, tackling, and that kinds. I think another thing that I would mention is the key terrain is not static. So as soon as we identify the key terrain and we place priority, it is going to continue to shift. And one of the drivers of that shift is modernization. I would characterize your Department of Defense in a state of perpetual modernization. I don't think we are looking to drive to a series of milestones or inch stones to then say, hey, we are going to now stop modernizing and wait a while. I think you're in a continuous state of modernization. And because of that, our key terrain continues to shift. And in order to maintain an understanding of where that key terrain is, you have to be attuned to the modernization efforts that your Department of Defense is undergoing. And it could be platform-oriented, could be effects-oriented, could be software-oriented, could be command and control-oriented. All of this becomes something that a cyber workforce would want to understand and integrate into the thinking of how do I better defend the key terrain that the modernization efforts are starting to reveal. We're pivoting toward data centricity. This is a command and control J6 conversation from net centricity, where we are establishing key terrain from an adversary perspective, but we are also looking at opportunities to ensure that we're defending better than we have in the past. We're certainly regionally, we have been regionally focused, but now we're thinking globally integration, which includes allies and partners, and the risks that allies and partners potentially introduce to that key terrain. So this, again, are several examples of how the environment continues to change. And as a workforce, we collectively need to be mindful of how that shift is impacting. I think the pace of experimentation and demonstration is, if not at an all-time high, it's near an all-time high, at least in my judgment, at least for the Department of Defense. And because of the experiments and because of the demonstrations and the rapid ability to roll in and pivot off of what those experiments reveal, we are trying to bake in and red team as we go. And we are seeing some success. But I think this is an important component that leads to the second thing that I would like to foot stomp. As we take this experimentation and modernization approach, this is a conversation about risk. Certainly your warfighters always think in terms of risk. And cyberspace is no different, and the workforce needs to be able to talk in terms of risk, because driving risk in cyberspace to zero is a failed strategy. We do not do that. As soon as we build a 10-foot wall, our adversary will arrive with an 11-foot ladder. So this is what competition looks like, and driving cyber risk to zero is not a strategy we hope to implement. What we do want is to understand the risk that's being introduced and understand that known risks so that we can then mitigate and reduce that risk and drive it further down. And we can't have those conversations if the workforce in cyberspace can't articulate clearly to commanders and warfighters what the risks are, what we're doing to mitigate them, how we're reducing them, and the balance of that risk, who owns it. And that who owns it is really an important conversation. Combatant commanders will tell you, I want to own much of the effects risks that are in my neighborhood. I'm confident other combatant commands would say, I am confident U.S. Cyber Command has an understanding of that risk, and I would want it to be informed. The IC have an opinion on what that looks like. So this is a really important conversation, and I articulate it to this audience because when you're talking to warfighters in cyberspace, the conversation of risk is one of the very first things that I think that they would want to have. Authorities, mitigations, and who owns the risks. So hopefully that is a foot stomp that resonates with this audience. One of the things I'd also articulate is maybe a foot stomp is this is a characterization that I described. And I think if we were having this conversation 8 or 10 years ago, I would characterize combatant commands and warfighters in the following way. They don't fully understand cyberspace. They're grateful to have members on their staff that do. There is a conversation that as long as you are a comfortable cyber operator telling me what you're telling me, then I'm good with that. And it was incredibly mysterious. We had a hesitancy to execute the full authorities that were provided. We had effects lists that we were trying to work through. But combatant commands and warfighters, I think, lacked confidence and lacked understanding of the opportunity that cyberspace afforded in their neighborhood. That is a conversation that's old. Where I think we are today, we are much more integrated and synchronized with the effects that are presented in cyberspace to integrate across warfighting functions and integrated across warfighting domains. Likewise, in the other side on the gap is the workforce. If I were having this conversation 8 to 10 years ago, I would say the workforce was characterized by incredibly technically enabled and smart individuals who sometimes had a hard time speaking in terms of reference that the warfighter understood. We have, through a series of extraordinary leadership and also just experience, moved to the point where combatant commands and their cyber operators are speaking in common terms. And I think this is a confidence builder for the warfighter, and I think it's something for the feather of the cap of the workforce that we have swung the pendulum from only having technical conversations to warfighting conversations through the lens of a warfighting domain that was declared called cyberspace. And so this chasm that used to exist is now, in my mind, if not closed completely, much closer. And I think it's an important component that says, in my mind, we are at a point where cyberspace operations are more integrated and synchronized in time and space through the warfighter than they ever have been before. And this is a compliment to the workforce, because we would not have gotten to this point if it weren't for the hard work of the teammates that you represent and are. So one of the things that I also wanted to highlight, it's an observation, is we are also treating the talent differently. For the first time in my mind, I think the high demand, low density workforce that is the cyber workforce is being treated like one. In the past, we talked a little bit about the capacity challenge to address all the effects that we had hoped to meet. But we are now in a place where we evolve based upon the closure of the gap that I just described, where the workforce that's high demand, low density needs to be cared for in a different fashion. Part of that has to do with the selection and assessment component, who are the right folks to have on the workforce. The other piece is the training. How and what do we train them on and focus? We have seen extraordinary movements across all the services from a man, train, equip perspective that have invested in their service cyber components. And this is having, I think, really tremendous great effect in that regard. And it's not only the initial training, it's the investment that you make in the training consistently through the career of a cyber operator, regardless of their service. And I think that's an important component. The other thing, we're allowing them to be innovative and technically enabled. We are bringing in industry. We are partnering with academia. We are putting together environments within which these kinds of innovations can be taken to the next level. And we are training on those innovations so that when the time of our choosing is made, that the effects that hope to be achieved for the warfighter are indeed the effects that are achieved. And the final piece is maybe the talent management practices themselves. In the past, I think we didn't appreciate and treat a high demand, low density talent like they needed to be and manage them through the life cycle of their career the way we needed to. We're starting, I believe, to do that, and the talent management practices of both the services and the combatant commands to ensure that the most technical capabilities and people are on the most technical challenges are indeed the case. So they're in the right jobs at the right time. Ultimately, what I see from my perspective, and speaking on behalf of the combatant commands and the Joint Staff in a larger sense, and perhaps the Joint Force more specifically, is that there's been a significant culture shift. And what we're seeing out of the warfighter and what we're seeing out of the workforce in cyberspace is more co-joined and linked than ever before. And the idea that we're rapidly adapting to change. We're rapidly accounting for the modernization. We're embracing the uncertainty, and we understand the world is incredibly volatile, so we're more nimble than we have been in the past. I don't think we live in a world where we will be able to develop a workforce that's extraordinarily large. But I do believe, based upon all of these conversations, that we can develop the most capable cyber workforce on the earth. And I think that's the path that we're currently on. I know that your warfighter demand that, and they would expect the fact that the warfighting domain that is cyberspace is manned and enabled by a workforce that understands the warfighter needs. So the last thing I'll do is just basically say, one, thanks, and two, let me double tap on a couple of ideas. One, the rapid pace of change. It's not surprising to all of you to be nimble, agile in this space, because what you think today is not going to be the truth tomorrow. The other thing is the competition. I talked about the barrier to entry, sorry about that. And the point is, the adversaries aren't always nation states. And you guys know this because we're seeing a lot of adversaries get on the cyber playing field because this is where the cost imposition calculus really comes into play. I think we're seeing increased activity from those adversaries for that very reason. So again, there's a lot going on in this space. I double tap the modernization effort. The perpetual modernization your department is under demands we pay attention to the second, third, and fourth order impacts in cyberspace of the modernization. What we don't want to do is have the coolest thing since sliced bread delivered, only to find out that it's the most vulnerable thing we've ever delivered. And then that goes back to the risk conversation, of course. I mentioned the gap, warfighters and the workforce. We have closed. I think this is probably the most important point that I make because I sit in a number of meetings with combatant commanders and senior leaders, and when they talk about cyberspace, it is not in the terms that they did 10 years ago. Right now, they're as comfortable talking about cyberspace as any other scheme of fires or any other warfighting domain. And it should be, I think, warming your heart that you have had a really important part to bring this gap to closure, because it's not only the understanding of the combatant commands and the warfighter, it is because of the capabilities and confidence that they now have in the in the workforce that have given them the confidence to do that. So with those as kind of the great ideas that I had hoped to complement the conversation that you had heard yesterday, that I know was probably more enthralling and certainly more in depth, because when you talk about General Hawk, you talk about Katie Arrington, you talk about Paul Stanton and others that have spoken here today. They're just phenomenal individuals, and my hope today was to augment that conversation through the lens of an operational framework, a warfighting lens, and give you confidence that what you're doing each and every day has manifested itself, that we are starting to see extraordinary effects, big decisions, synchronization and integration like we've never seen before. So with that and time remaining, I'd like to take any questions you guys might have, if we have time.
All right, you know our paradigm. So if you have a question, step up to the mic. We have time for 2 brisk questions.
Brisk.
Brisk.
Do you have a brisk question?
Good afternoon, sir. It's an honor to actually be in your presence. My name is Farazad. I am a data analyst as of right now, but I have a very strong technical and educational background in cybersecurity, and I also work under Mr. Gorak, so it's an honor. Sir, it's in my opinion, cyber space domain, it's a non-lethal domain, but somehow it became the most dangerous domain among other domains. However, it did expand and rapidly, I think, due to its nature of digitality. So, and also, frankly, historically speaking, it took us generational decades to actually build the other domains. In your artistic opinion, during an invasive cyber attack or threat, do you think we should put our red or black hats on to attack the adversaries, or simply try to take the diplomatic negotiation route to try to help to implement and enhance our cyber strategies, if that makes sense.
It does, and I thank you for the question. In my mind, I think a couple things come to mind. One, we talked a little bit about risk, and I think in any case, as a warfighter would take into account either a response action or a first move or a complementary action to kinetic activity, there's a risk calculation that goes, and this, I think, is part and parcel to kinetic fires. An example might be what I think is useful are traditional warfighting rubrics that help us determine what our actions are going to be. An example in this case might be, we know what kinetic fires look like. In this case, there's a process by which we nominate targets, we go through a series of risk mitigations, we go through a series of what ifs, and we also talk about not only risk, but the counteraction that an adversary might take as a result of that kinetic event. The same rubric applies when you're talking about schemes of fire through cyberspace. And I think this again goes to the idea that we are closing this gap from traditional means by which warfighters operate, are getting more comfortable that in the scheme of fires, they account for cyberspace effects to be achieved, and they have a conversation about the risks and the counteraction that might be a response from any particular effect that's applied. In many cases, or in some cases, a cyber effect might be the only fire. And in other cases, a cyber effect might be part of a larger series of endeavors to enable and integrate into a larger scheme of maneuver. So I give you that as hopefully an understanding of how we fully inform that debate and discussion. And I think that because it's nothing new, that the means by which the effects are delivered and the warfighting domain is different. But the idea of delivering fires in a scheme of fires in a larger sense to a warfighter makes all the sense in the world. And that's why we have gotten to the point where confidence is reinforced and built because of the success of that rubric. So I hope that answers most of that question. That was fulsome. Thank you.
It does, thank you. And I also cultivated from your response, we can also take both approaches, but thank you, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Morning, sir. Miguel Laporte. I'm currently with the DoD CIO WID, but in a previous life, I worked with CISA helping drive their Secure by Design campaign, and I'm sure that there are a lot of people here who are familiar with that concept. I'm curious, in your capacity as the director of C4, where do you see the department's onus lying in securing devices and networks by practicing good cyber hygiene versus investing in industry tools and equipment that are out of the box, designed securely to put the onus on our industry partners?
Yeah, I think a lot's in there. So allies and partners first. We are integrating allies and partners now by design instead of by exception. And the challenge of that pivot, I think, is important because if you were to ask a warfighter their scheme of maneuver and their secret sauce and their scheme of victory of any particular plan that they have, it is integrated in with allies and partners from the beginning. And so as we think through cyberspace, defense, and integration, a vulnerability to one partner is a vulnerability to all as we integrate more. So we want to be accountable to those vulnerabilities. We want to understand that risk and call. But we also want to address it early so that we bake in the defenses and mitigations to those risks from the very beginning. And an example of that, I think back to the experimentation and demonstration conversation we'd had, we are conducting major experimentation and demonstration events with allies and partners every quarter. And part of that is the approach to not only digitally integrate, but also apply commercial capabilities to test and determine and red team to say, hey, given our particular scheme of maneuver or giving our particular community of interest that we're trying to operate with, these tools, these capabilities are more successful than others. And even those that are successful, we would want to continue to evolve as an example. But I think the cadence of the experimentation and the demonstrations are giving us an opportunity to integrate allies and partners from the beginning and work through what that starts to look like. I mentioned also the data-centric pivot. So we're getting a little bit, we're getting a lot of it away from securing networks and getting into securing data. So this is a universe that many of the industry partners live in every day and have been actually pulling us toward this. And frankly, allies and partners, and I won't name single ones, but there are some allies and partners who are way ahead of us in this regard. And so in many ways, we're catching up to them. The final piece I'll mention is far too frequently when it comes to talking about allies and partners, we talk about the kinds of information that we would share with our allies and partners. Based upon the demonstrations and the experimentation, it's about what we're consuming. It is, we have turned that conversation completely on its head. We used to always talk about, hey, well, we'll share this, we'll share this, we'll share that with these particular partners. We are now all about, hey, what do the partners have in terms of their information that we need? And we need a paradigm and a sharing paradigm and an integration paradigm that allow us to do that. Because frankly, when you look in aggregate of the allies and partners and the capabilities that they have and the data and information that they have, we actually want to consume it more than we have to offer to share. Does that make sense? Hopefully that answers your question.
Thanks, sir.